All right. Well, thank you, Ashley. And yeah, so I am Matt Bunch. I'm the horticulturist for the Giving Grove National Organization, but also here in Kansas City, I am the director of education, horticulture, and orchards here with Kansas City Community Gardens. So I've been doing this since 2013. Prior to this, I was out at our local botanical garden with an all edible landscape known as the Heartland Harvest Garden, and it was within that job and that garden that I really learned about Asian pears and growing Asian pears and a number of the varieties thereof. With our orchard program here in Kansas City, we have planted probably about 1,000 Asian pears at over 270 little micro community orchards. So we have a little bit of experience with these, but this is just one vantage point. There are a lot of Asian pears out there. So, with this presentation, I'm going to kind of go through just a little bit of the history, the cultivation, the maintenance, and cultivars, and any sort of special conditions that you would need for Asian pears. And as Ashley said, yeah, if you have any questions, enter them into the chat and we'll try to get them answered for you during the presentation and save a little bit of time after the presentation. All right, first off, let's just kind of go back and understand what this species is, where it came from. Asian pears have been used as fruit crops for well over 3,000 years. The evidence of their first cultivation was seen at least 3,000 years ago. And then they were brought over to Japan in right around 800 in the Common Era. It was really in Japan where a lot of the Asian pear culture kind of took off a little bit more. So there are nearly 3,000 of these cultivars that are grown worldwide. So the most of the species that we utilize as Asian pears are going to be this Pyrus serotina, and that is the sand pear, as it was commonly called. Uh, it was called the sand pear because of the gritty nature of it, and you'll notice if you've had some types of pears, they will have a little bit of a grit in them, and even to a lesser extent, a lot of the cultivated varieties of Asian pears have a little grit with them. So. Pyrus serotina is basically most of the varieties that we're going to be talking about. There are the Usurian pear, Pyrus usuriensis, and that's also another one that is used for hybridizing a lot, and it brings in a more cold tolerant pear. So the Usurian pear has been used a lot also with the European pears and hybridization. And then there is the Pyrus Brett Schneideri, which is a the duck pear or the white pear, which it's complicated as far as all of the genetics, but it's some say it might be related to your Usuriensis and Serotina. Whatever. It's its own sort of distinct thing, and a number of pears are bred using some of those genetics of Brett Schneideri. So, how did these Asian pears make it into the U.S.? So basically, they kind of first got brought over through the East Coast. And this was through a lot of European settlers that brought them in, basically bringing them in first as an ornamental. and then hybridizing them with European pears. So some of you may be familiar with the variety LeConte. Kiefer is a variety that many of you have probably heard before. Kiefer is a hybrid Pyrus serotina with the Pyrus communis. Um, and so these Asian pears were hybridized with the European pears to impart some fire blight resistance. And we'll talk about fire blight a little bit later, but it is one of the major pests that pear growers and Asian pear growers do face. Um, Asian pears were also brought over to the American West in the mid 19th century, and this was with a lot of the Chinese gold miners and railroad workers that were brought in and immigrated to the United States. These are mainly Zone 4 through Zone 9 crops, which covers, I believe, pretty much all of us on the call here. And this is going to be rootstock and cultivar dependent. And here in the US, these are pretty important crops through California, Oregon, and Washington. So as far as kind of us and sort of general cultivation and growing, like I say, they're highly adaptable, and even not only with the zones but also our pH, 6 to 7.5. Most of our soils are very accommodating of Asian pears. Asian pears are earlier flowering, and they flower typically before European pears. Got into a big discussion with a customer earlier this year, and he was using Chat GPT to try to prove me wrong that, well, but it says here that Asian pears flower at the same time as European pears. Like, well, that might be the case, but 9 times out of 10, your Asian pears are going to flower before European pears. And so when people ask, well, can I have cross-pollination between the both of them? You certainly can if you have a very late flowering Asian pear and an early flowering European pear. But generally, they flower at two distinct times. There are some self-fertile cultivars of Asian pears, and we'll go over some of those cultivars, but most of these need cross-pollination with another Asian pear variety. Another thing about Asian pears, and it's one of the reasons we really like them with our orchard program, is they're very precocious, meaning they tend to crop early. Typically by year 3, they are large enough in trunk and branch stature to support fruit weight, and they have definitely developed their flower buds by year 3. So this is important, especially for people who are like, oh gosh, I have to wait so long for these things to fruit. Well, the nice thing about a well anchored in Asian pear, you can get 50 fruits on by your third year of that tree being in the ground. So all Asian pears tend to have a very upright growth habit, and that also means that not only is it going to be sort of a strong central leader, 15 to 30 feet tall, but also a lot of the branches tend to shoot straight up. And so that means that you will have to practice a lot of tree training and pruning to get these to spread out more than grow up more. Asian pears are kind of nice because you can space them fairly tight in an orchard. Typically, we like to allow for about 15 feet of space for most fruit tree crops. But Asian pears, you can kind of squeeze them in a little bit more. 10 to 12 foot on center is not uncommon, even in a community orchard type space. Most of the rootstocks that Asian pears are grafted onto are also tolerant of clay and tighter soils. These aren't like cherries, they're not like apples. Asian pears are going to be able to handle the soils that occasionally get waterlogged a little bit more or that very tight clay. Asian pears are also a little bit different than European pears. If you know anything about European pears, oftentimes you are harvesting them a week to 10 days before you can actually bite into them and eat them. But Asian pears need to ripen on the tree. If they do not ripen on the tree, they will not ripen on the counter or in cold storage. So they have to reach that critical point of ripeness before you can harvest them. All right, so here are some of the elephants in the room with Asian pear trees, and these are the pests and diseases that many of us will probably face when we grow these trees. Now, the reason why you saw that California, Oregon, and Washington tend to be the main growers of these pears, they don't have nearly as much of the disease and pest pressure the way many of us do in what we'll call the humid East. Um, so let's go over what some of these pests and diseases are, and kind of have a little description of them as well as some of the actions you can take to mitigate these. So fire blight is for sure the biggest problem that Asians pears face. Um there are some varieties that exhibit more tolerance than others. We'll go over and talk about these varieties in a little bit, but I will tell you that younger trees are going to be more susceptible. And basically, pruning out below the blackened tissue is one of the remedy. A lot of commercial growers end up using agromycin and streptomycin sprays. These are by no means organic sprays. There are some other sprays that you can apply to end up protecting your trees, but that can be really tricky too. Fire blight is really hard to prevent against with a lot of organic sprays. But if you do see it, you should prune it out and prune it out below the canker. So on the photo on the right-hand side, you see the twig. If you look a little bit down the twig, you will actually see some little fruitlets. So the fire blight infection has come in through the blossom, and then it spreads into the twig, and then it spreads down into the branch. The canker here on the limb indicates that that is dead, and you would prune out below that canker. Rusts have been a big issue here with us in Kansas City. It's kind of been a wet, cool spring, and these rusts will proliferate on the leaf tissue, and in some cases can even cause problems on the fruitlets of these Asian pears. Um, this is especially a problem in areas that have not only the populations of eastern red cedar, but also just any sort of ornamental juniper evergreens that are used in kind of your typical landscapes. Uh, those are the alternate host for the leaf rust. And so sometimes eliminating some of those plantings in the yard can be helpful. The problem with rust is rust spores can travel up to 2 miles, so it becomes pretty difficult to try to eliminate the problem. Um, Rust, there are some ways that you can protect against rust. However, um, it's one of those things where you have to spray while the rust is actively spreading from the junipers to the foliage. So for us around here, that's typically an April time frame of spraying and using a protective fungicide like a copper fungicide or even something like a neem, which ends up coating that leaf surface with an oil that makes the leaf inhospitable to the infection. So the other thing is Fabria leaf spot. And actually, if you look at this photo on the right-hand side, it kind of has a trifecta of things going on. It has a little bit of rust, it has a little bit of Fabria leaf spot, and it also has Persilla. This was taken on a tree right outside our door. But you know what? It has a healthy fruit crop on it, and the tree looks pretty good. So, one of the morals of this story is these trees can still live quite well and produce a healthy fruit crop with some of these issues on it. Um, so the rust can be somewhat cosmetic until it gets onto the fruit. The Fabria leaf spot uh, is somewhat cosmetic until it gets on the fruit. So some other things are Pseudomonas, which can mimic fire blight. This can best be avoided by practicing summer pruning. And we'll talk more about summer pruning versus dormant season pruning. But dormant season pruning on a lot of Asian and European pears oftentimes brings about adverse reactions, not only within the growth habit of the pears, but can bring on other pests and diseases. So practicing summer pruning is something you should just get your mind prepared for with species in the Pyrus genus. Um, so then we have some other things like leaf curl midge. We have leaf blister mite. We have Persilla. These are all insect pests that feed on the leaves and cause problems with the foliage that can end up weakening the trees. All of these solutions basically involve some sort of insecticide spray in either the dormant season or right after bud break or at leaf fall. And I don't have pictures of all of those, but you can certainly look up all of the issues with leaf curl midge, leaf blister mite, and Persilla. And lastly, but it's not last because there are other pests, but codling moth. And for those of you growing apples, you probably know of codling moth. It is definitely a pest of apples. Codling moth is also a pest of pears and Asian pears, although it is not as serious of a pest. Uh, Asian pears have a much thicker texture, thicker skin, and they are not as sought after by codling moths. The adults they don't tend to lay their eggs on the fruitlets. Now, if you do have codling moth infestations and you're noticing it in your Asian pears, one of the best things you could do is a petal fall spray, and that can either be something like the holistic spray or a Bacillus thuringiensis, a BT spray at petal fall, which will end up killing the larva of the codling moth. All right, so now we're getting closer into some of the cultivars here. This is a little disease susceptibility chart. And this is something I've had on my cork board for a while. This one was reviewed fairly recently, but I think it first came out sometime maybe in the early 2000s, and this is evaluating cultivars and their susceptibility to certain diseases.
Hey Matt,
And yeah,
before we dive into this chart more, is summer pruning, is that regionally? Can you do that in places like Colorado? Is summer pruning more for certain hardiness zones?
yeah. So summer pruning can be practiced in even a like Colorado. So let's say you're still sort of short season, if you will. Summer pruning typically is going to be in the hot, dry season of your region. So for us here in Kansas City, we practice most of that from kind of late July through early September. And it coincides oftentimes with harvest time. So, for example, if we have the cultivar Shinsui, which is the earliest one that we harvest, which is typically mid to late July, we will harvest and we will prune that tree at the time of harvest. So that way we're getting all the fruit off and we're cutting back a lot of the taller growth and we're sort of decreasing the height of the tree, decreasing the wood weight of the tree at that time. Summer pruning also sort of tempers the growth, whereas pruning during the dormant season tends to reinvigorate the growth, and you generally don't want to reinvigorate the growth on Asian or European pears because you will end up getting too much growth. So hopefully that sort of answered that question a little bit. We're going to talk about this more when we're talking about pruning. But back to the disease susceptibility. So this ranked cultivars based on fire blight susceptibility, Pseudomonas susceptibility, pear scab, sunburn, and also Fabria leaf spot. And so if you look at these, the lower the number for fire blight is basically like one, which would indicate a dead tree. 10 means it's fairly resistant. And then you have some other things like I, where it's just intermediate. They don't have sort of a category for that so much. Um, but then you look through and you see susceptible is S, R is resistant, and intermediate means it's somewhere in between resistant and susceptible. So this chart comes in really handy as we have planted a number of these varieties, and I continue to sort of evaluate our varieties compared to this chart. Um, so, if any of you are growing these, or if you're not growing them, this chart can help sort of illuminate a little bit more some of these varieties. Notice that Bartlett, it is a 1 down there for fire blight, meaning it's pretty much a dead tree because it is going to get fire blight. However, you look at varieties like Shinko, it's a 7.5. Surrey is a 6.5. So they're going to have more resistance to fire blight. So this is a handy table for making those cultivar decisions. Now, another thing when you're making cultivar decisions is also understanding the rootstock that these trees are grafted onto. There are more than just these root stocks, but these are kind of the big four that a lot of Asian pears are grafted onto. Pyrus caloriana, which is basically what the Bradford pear is. Um, it was originally brought over in the early 1900s as a root stock because it's fire blight resistant. And that fire blight resistance can help impart some of that resistance onto the grafted specimen. Um, Now, early on, they didn't think that Pyrus caloriana was hardy to his own 5A, but it certainly is, and it is tolerant of poorly drained soils. However, like most rootstocks, it does sucker, and so that's something that you will have to worry about. Pyrus betrifolia, the birch-leafed pear, is even more hardy to a zone 4. The trees are really quick to get rooted in. This is probably the industry standard for Asian pear rootstocks. Very tolerant of poorly drained soils. However, the largest drawback of this is it suckers fairly freely. So you do have to keep on top of the rootstock suckers. The Old Home Farmingdale rootstocks, they are not for all of the cultivars, and it's going to vary cultivar by cultivar. Um, but the nice thing about the Old Home rootstocks is they feature good fire blight resistance. They also feature resistance to some of the root pests of pears, so things like woolly aphid, um, and the 97 will dwarf the tree a little bit, and the 333 will dwarf it a little bit more. You're still going to have a pretty good sized tree, but you do have a little bit more dwarfing capacity, especially with the OHXF 333. All right, so let's get into some of the cultivars. And if they have a little asterisk there, these are cultivars that we have some experience, in some cases, quite a bit of experience with here in Kansas City. So I'll just kind of talk about these some. Um, so Chojuro is probably one of the more planted Asian pears that we've put out there. It for us, fire blight really it can show up on it, but rarely. Um, and the trees are really pretty strong growers, and they crop year in and year out for us. The You see the two photo or the photo there of Chojuro and Yowanashi. Um, so Chojuro tends to have a sweeter flavor and a much darker color. There is Shinseki, which is also known as New Century. This is one of the smooth skin typed Asian pears. So you'll notice with both the Asian pears here in the picture, they have a lot of pronounced lenticels. It's more of a russeted skin, whereas Shinseki is more of a smooth skin. Very juicy, tasty, crisp pear. Fireblight does tend to be a little bit more of a problem with Shinseki. So getting it over that fireblight hump can be an issue, but once you get this tree going, the fruits are very enjoyable. Yoanashi is another one that we plant very frequently. And you'll see it's right there paired up with Chojuro. They tend to ripen, their ripening time overlaps, so they work well in a lot of our orchards. Yoanashi is a very upright grower. You could often pick it out of the orchard because it's going to be more of a tall spindle, whereas some other things will tend to round out a little bit more. Um, but the some of the problems with Yoanashi is sometimes it could have light bearing years, so it can almost revert to alternate bearing. Now, practicing consistent summer pruning on this tree can help with that. Because sometimes when you have too much of a fruit load one year, you won't have that much fruit load the next year. But if you do a lot of summer pruning, you can correct some of that. The other issue with Yoanashi is it can be a bit of a rust magnet. And you saw the picture of the leaf rust earlier. That's another way we oftentimes will pick Yoanashi out in a field of Asian pears. It's like, oh, look at all the leaf rust. So if you're in a high rust area, you may not want Yoanashi. Shinsui is definitely a favorite of ours. This is the earliest ripening Asian pear for us. This year, it's probably going to be the first week of July because everything is way early this year. Um, but it doesn't seem to have issues with fire blight. Rust and Fabria leaf spot are minimal at the most on this tree. So it's kind of checked all of those boxes, and having that early ripening. Now, the fruits are a lot smaller because it has early ripening, and we do have to thin this one heavily because it tends to overcrop. But Shinsui is definitely, as far as kind of the easiest growing Asian pear, I think that's checked all the boxes. Shinko, and if you've looked at lists of Asian pears, Shinko is oftentimes mentioned as the most fire blight resistant. We could go back to the list that I just had on the previous slide. It actually had a score of 7.5, which was the highest on that table. However, we see Shinko with a lot of fire blight on it. And so, I think fire blight resistance is not fire blight immunity. Fire blight resistance is on a spectrum. And this happens to be bad fire blight year for us. So, we're seeing it in Shinko. But the fruits are going to be kind of a medium sized, medium to medium large fruit. Um, and the other nice thing about Shinko, if you're looking for a pear for a smaller space, Shinko tends to put on a lot of fruiting spurs, fruit buds, rather than vegetative growth. So you can keep Shinko in a fairly tight, confined space and still get a lot of fruit crop. Niseki is another one. Um, and this one's also known as 20th century, and this is going to be a mid-season fruit ripening, uh, uh, kind of yellowish, kind of like Shinko. It does the same thing as far as growth habit. It tends to form more of those fruiting spurs rather than vegetative growth. So if you're looking for a couple of varieties in a tight space. Both 20th century Niseki and Shinko would be the ones to go for. Niseki does have some fire blight issues, but once again, there aren't many Asian pears that don't. All right, some other cultivars that are out there. Korean Giant is a big favorite of ours, and big is the key word because these fruits frequently are over 1 pound each. You see the photo up above; those were one of those is 1.1 pound, the other is just right under a pound. And we had to thin those out because the tree was so heavily laden, and they probably could have hung on the tree for another 10 days to ripen more, but the branch was already overloaded. So, very large fruits, long storage life, which we love that long storage life. That means that you can keep those stored in cold storage and 4 to 6 months easily, which is really nice. One that we don't plant as much, but we do really like from its flavor standpoint is Surrey. Surrey seems to have more of the Pyrus usuriensis genes in it. It's the fruits are sort of large and oblong. They can get up to a pound. But what is really neat about Surrey is the flavor. Well, it's the bright white flesh. One, you cut into it and it's so bright white compared to a lot of the other Asian pears. But then the flavor is very unique. It has sort of a tropical banana, vanilla. Sometimes you get a little bit of coconut in the flavoring. So from a flavor standpoint, I think this one has all of the other Asian pears beat because of that uniqueness. We did an informal poll last year, and I think there were 5 staff members, and we did blind tastings. Surrey was the winner by far. Let's see. Kosui is another one. We we can't really recommend Kosui as much anymore. We love it because it has sort of that smooth skin, yellow color, very sweet. But fire blight has become an issue. We had to take a couple of our Kosuis out this year. Nitaka is one that is kind of along the lines of Chojuro. We don't have as much experience with Nitaka, but we're growing it just out of recommendation, not only for the Fabria leaf spot, but also the fire blight resistance. Now, there are a couple of varieties on this list that we actually don't have experience with here, but really curious about. And one of these, I know one of our affiliates up in Maine is growing this. It's the Ready Robin Asian pear. And you see the picture of it there. And that picture because you look online and you'll see a lot of other pictures. This was one that I took at an orchard in Seattle. Um, but some of the fruits they almost look exactly like apples. They get really a predominant red blush with that orange background. But Ready Robin has a lot of the Brett Schneider eye in it, so it's going to be more cold tolerant. So for those of you who are solidly in a zone 4, it definitely will grow well. And then there is the Juicy Jewel, which this is bred with the University of Minnesota. And this came out a few years ago. This is also a decidedly zone 4. It's a hybrid Asian pear, so it's a hybrid of Shinseki and Summercrisp. And if memory serves me, I think Summercrisp has some Asian genes in it as well. So that's just a little bit about select cultivars, but you can go down the rabbit hole, and there's so many more out there. Uh, so, but this is kind of our experience with some of these in the Kansas City area. All right, so let's get into a little bit of the maintenance of Asian pears. Because yeah, that's all the key to getting a good fruit crop and growing these well. So as I mentioned earlier, all Asian pears tend to be very upright growers. Meaning strong central leader, and then all of the branching is really going to have a propensity to shoot straight up from there. So, limb spreading is a must. You'll notice the picture there on the left-hand side. That is a young Asian pear. And if you look, there are limb spreaders that have been put in to increase those branch angles. Now, the thing about Asian pears is sometimes those branch angles can get set within 1 year. So you will have narrow crotches, narrow branch angles really early on. And sometimes what you may have to do is you may have to prune those branches off to get more preferential angles, also to get newer wood that is more pliable that you can end up putting that limb spreader into. Asian pears are one of the more brittle trees that we work with, and so the older the wood, the harder it is to bend that wood. So getting those limb spreaders in on the first year, second year branches is going to be key. So using those limb spreaders typically stay in the tree for a growing season, and then you're moving them around the tree as the years go on. Typically, you're not using limb spreaders on trees that are 5 years or older because you've already set a lot of those scaffold branches and your lateral branches. So, as far as pruning your Asian pears go, a lot of them are done to what's called central leader pruning. And so that is one standard trunk. But then as that trunk gets to be about 10 to 12 feet tall, then you would start topping it. And you would top it and then cut it back and let lateral branches form. And then instead of the tree being sort of one Christmas tree or spire-like shape, it ends up being a little bit more cylindrical, more columnar. And that leads to the candelabra style, which is actually it's almost like an open center type style, but relying on a central leader that has been headed back a little bit lower to more of an 8 feet, 7 feet, 6 feet, and then letting all of those scaffold limbs go outward and then upward, almost like a candelabra. Now, this can work fairly well, and especially one thing that this is good for is if your tree is prone to fire blight infections, because it can be harder for some of those infections to end up getting into the trunk because you have multiple larger limbs that are going outward. So it could get into one limb and it can't spread into the trunk. Is there a
Matt,
question?
on that fire blight note,
Yeah.
Alan said fire blight has hit our trees hard this season. Will this make our trees more susceptible next year? And what can we do as a preventative action for 2027? And a follow-up question on that, as trees mature, are they less likely to get fire blight?
Yeah. So uh, I guess a first question. Yeah. What can you do to try to prevent more fire blight in the future? So, certainly because they have gotten fire blight this year, uh, the fire blight is in the area. It's in the tree unless you get it pruned out. Um, it does have a chance of cropping up again. So as far as I mean, what you need to do is you need to prune it out and you need to make sure you get everything pruned out. So you're going below where the canker is. But then as far as next year, some things that you can do uh, sort of as preventative sprays. There is Serenade, which is a Bacillus product. It's a Bacillus subtilis, which can be sprayed during blossom time. So it works basically as a biofungicide and will help keep the fire blight from inoculating the blossoms. So Serenade, you would spray that during blossom time when fire blight would be actively getting transferred from the pollinators to the blossom. Another thing that you can do is shortly thereafter, you can start applying copper fungicides as protectorants for any other fire blight infections. Now, what was the second question? Because this is kind of a two-part thing.
Yeah, about will as trees mature, are they less likely to get fire blight?
Yes, as trees mature, yes, they are less likely to get fire blight, but there is also some cultural things that you would need to do too. So, avoiding over pruning and especially over pruning during the dormant season. So, over pruning during the dormant season is going to lead to a whole lot of new growth, and that new growth is going to be more susceptible to fire blight. Another thing that you'll want to not do is not over fertilize, or in some cases, maybe just don't fertilize your pear trees at all, because that fertilization is going to drive new growth, and once again, that new growth is going to be more susceptible. So typically, as these trees age, they get over the hump. They get over the hump of fire blight infection if you have gotten all of the fire blight infection out from previous infections. And I think that is the key there, is making sure you have pruned out all of the previous infections. The other thing with pruning out those infections is making sure that your tools get sterilized in between the pruning cuts on the infected tree, because you can spread the infection within the same tree, or you could also spread it to a different tree that you're going to be pruning on. So that's also very key, is that whole sanitation part. So hopefully that answered those questions.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
We also have a question about pollination. If you want to answer that now or wait until the end.
We can go ahead and answer it now.
So this person only has one Hosui pear in his front yard, that's supposed to be self-pollinating. They have an ornamental pear in their backyard. Will that be sufficient for pollinating?
Yeah, so the ornamental pear, yeah, so Hosui is, let's see, Hosui is not self-fertile. Is that right? I don't have a pollination chart in front of me, but I don't think it is one. Um, yeah, so with the Pyrus caloriana, there is some pollen transfer that would happen, so you should be able to get a certain amount of pollination service with the ornamental pear and the Hosui. I believe they overlap nicely too, because that's the biggest thing, is the overlap. Um, it's less about the sort of genus species, and it's more about the overlap with the pairs. So the answer is yes, probably.
Okay, thank
Yeah.
you.
All right. So a little bit back to this. So you see the included bark with the Asian pear here and the very narrow branch angles. So those are things that you really want to avoid. You want to make sure you get stuff like that pruned out before it's too late. Because especially with that top photo and the big circle, that's prime for splitting out. You can actually see below there, there's a wound where, guess what? A branch split out because it was a narrow connection. And those are, like I say, they're prone. That's weak tissue. Another thing to avoid is the over pruning during the dormant season. This was an Asian pear that was hacked back pretty severely during the dormant season. And if you look, you can see all of this new growth. These are 8 foot tall shoots. So you want to avoid that because you end up getting into a vicious cycle of basically having to prune out new growth year in and year out. So yet another reason to practice that summertime pruning rather than over pruning during the dormant season. All right, some other maintenance that you'll want to concern yourself with on the Asian pears. Fertilizing. So, kind of mentioned that earlier with the question. The first few years of your Asian pear tree, yeah, you will need to fertilize, but then really, you may not need to fertilize those trees much more beyond that, especially with nitrogen. You may end up having some micronutrient deficiencies here and there, and so you'll have to treat that separately. But as far as nitrogen goes, your trees should not really need any of that after the sort of the establishment phase. Fruit thinning, fruit thinning, fruit thinning, fruit thinning. We will go through each one of our Asian pear trees a couple of different times, typically in May and June, so we can avoid things like this picture on the bottom right-hand side of fruits that are just hanging like grapes on the trees, because these things will get overloaded, especially the more varieties you have in one orchard. The pollination, it works great. So fruit thinning needs to happen down to one per cluster, and sometimes you are thinning even beyond that because the blossom clusters are there's one at the tip, there's one 2 inches further, there's one 2 inches further. So you're actually sometimes you are removing more than just to the one per blossom cluster. Rootstock sucker removal, and I mentioned that earlier, especially with the Caloriana and Betchifolia rootstocks on the bottom left here. And this is certainly a problem when it comes to community orchards and especially when it comes to schoolyard orchards. So oftentimes, those summer vacations, well, the trees are still growing and the rootstock suckers are still growing. So you see the before and after with all of the rootstocks, and there's the after of the tree itself being liberated from the rootstock suckers. So make sure to get on that. And then there is sort of the little bit of the protect from birds. We have a major issue with starlings coming in. And those starlings, they oftentimes they're looking for water, and that water comes in the form of Asian pear juice. And before we know it, we will end up having we will have these husks hanging from the trees as the starlings have just pecked out all of the flesh and juice from that fruit. The nest here is not a starling nest, by the way. That is a robin's nest. If you grow Asian pears, you'll know that robins really love to nest in them because of the tighter branch angles. Oddly enough, the robins aren't a problem when it comes to getting juice out of Asian pears, though. They just utilize the trees as a nesting spot. And who knows, they may eat some of the insect pests along the way. All right, so we're kind of getting close to wrapping up here, but harvest, storage, and usage. So, as I mentioned earlier, all Asian pears are harvested at ripeness. So, understanding what ripeness is important. The coloration of the fruit, the background color of the fruit. So, that's a term you should familiarize yourself with, background color. Basically, that's the underlying color of the fruit has changed. So it's changed from, let's say, green to a light green or green to a yellow, and the overriding color is more of an orange. Definitely different than European pears. Avoid damage during harvest. So the skin bruises pretty easily on these Asian pears, and any little bruise like that means that it will lack storage time in the refrigerator. They should be refrigerated right after. As a matter of fact, they start losing their texture and really kind of their flavor if they are not refrigerated right after harvest. So make sure you get them into cold storage right after that. Um, so there are some varieties, and especially some of the summer varieties like Shinsui and Shinseki, they don't really have much of a storage life, and that's typically true of a lot of those early midsummer ripening fruits. But then some of the later ripening fruits, the September and October ones, those will have a much longer storage life. Now, the whole usage thing, that's a whole other presentation because Asian pears have a wide variety of uses. Here in the States, we just tend to think of them as being more something for fresh eating. But it definitely goes beyond that. A lot of their traditional usages are used in stews and for tenderizing meats. So those sugars can be used as sort of a marinade to help tenderize different meats. You add the fruits into stews, and it adds that natural sweetness. You add it into stir fry. Um, Asian pears are used in a lot of kimchi recipes. Asian pears can dehydrate. I am still utilizing some Asian pears that I've dehydrated. I have used them fairly recently in some stir fries just to add that little bit of sweetness, a little bit of chew texture in there. It just adds that little something different. Um, but generally, Asian pears are not really that great for pastries. We've had people try that, but they are way too watery. Way too watery to be using in anything like a pie, like a tart, or in any sort of preserves. So with that, these are just a few of the selected resources. Lee Reich, and the book is now kind of a little bit dated, but he talks about a number of the varieties. Michael Phillips, in his Holistic Orchard, talks about a number of the varieties. The Pacific Northwest Plant Disease Management Handbook, and there are a lot of P&W handbooks out there on Asian pears, has been especially helpful. And one resource that I use for a lot of different, it has less to do with the tree itself, but more to do with the fruit, is the Specialty Produce website. And so this is a grocery store, I believe, out of San Diego. wide variety of different produce, and they really do deep dives on the history and usage thereof. And lastly, we're July 4th is coming up, and celebrate as you will. But also, you may want to look into celebrating Nashi no Hai, which is a Japanese holiday dedicated to Asian pears. So look that one up. I'll probably be having a shinsui that day to celebrate the holiday. And with that, if there are any more questions, I'd be happy to entertain them.
Thank you, Matt. Any questions? This is a time when you can just come off mute and let us know if you have any. Thanks for sharing about that holiday, Matt. I didn't know.
Yeah, yeah, I think it's sort of a much better way to celebrate.
Yeah. Agree. Well, if we don't have any questions, I'm going to go ahead and close here. I will be following up tomorrow with some notes from this, as well as information on any of our upcoming sessions. Thank you so much for joining us, and Matt, thank you for sharing your knowledge with everybody.
All right, thank you all.
Thanks, everybody. Bye.
Thank you.